everyone. Welcome back to Across the Campus, your college sports podcast presented by atbsports.net. I'm Alex, the captain, and I'm joined by AJ, the guru.
What's going on, guys?
All right, AJ, we got a lot to cover today. The college football rankings just came out, so I think that's something we can talk about today's episode.
Yeah.
Conference championship week, obviously a big one. But last week, let's look at some big games from last week. Rivalry weekend. Let's start at the top of the list. We have the Iron Bowl, Auburn, Alabama. What are your thoughts on that?
Wasn't too surprised. I think I did call that Auburn would win that last week. But I guess I was surprised at the lack of defense, though, I thought. I mean,
that was super incredible.
Both teams put up a lot of points. And offensively, I mean, they just moved the ball at will, both sides, or both Auburn and Alabama both did.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that Mac Jones was in his second official collegiate start, and he looked pretty comfortable in that Alabama offense, surprisingly.
Yeah.
I think the other side of that, though, was the Alabama defense was just expecting their offense to score at will, and they were fine giving up as many points as they did until the end of the game when Nick Saban was tricked, if you will. I thought that was pretty cool to see somebody finally outsmart Nick Saban.
That was interesting, having the punter sitting out there at wide receiver.
That really messed up a lot of things for Alabama, got them offsides, ended the game effectively. I was very impressed with Auburn's offense in this game. Keep in mind earlier this year they lost to LSU 23-20 with very minimal offense, plenty of defense in that game. And then out here they said, no, we're gonna sling it around. Bo Nix looked really, really comfortable against that Alabama defense.
Yeah, for a freshman, he seemed very comfortable in the pocket. He was able to get the ball around pretty much at will. He did a really good job.
Yeah, super impressed by him. Next, we have the Civil War, Oregon versus Oregon State. That one was more or less what we expected, Oregon getting the W out there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't one of those. I was expecting a far different score. And for me, I felt like it was a little bit closer than what it should have been, at least for part of the game. That being said, Oregon obviously took care of business, kept their conference championship hopes alive. It was very low scoring, though, and that, I think, is what surprised me.
Yeah, it was. I didn't get to watch that, actually. That was one of those late games.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Oregon does play Utah here, as we'll get into it later on, the Pac-12 championship. There's a lot of implications that go on into that game.
Yes.
For the playoff rankings, which we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. But yeah, there's a lot of stake there in Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon looked pretty solid. Justin Herbert, again, another just good game. Nothing explosive. Yeah, he's very consistent. I think that's a good way to put it. He's very consistent, does what he needs to do in the pocket. The Oaken Bucket, you being an Indiana person, you kind of take the lead on this one. Yeah,
it was really one of those games where obviously Purdue only has 4 wins on the year, and IU coming in with 7, going into overtime. And the slop that is West Lafayette. It was, of course, they're one of the few teams that have a grass field, and it looked rough. You could tell that they had a bunch of home games this year, and they were playing this one in the rain as well. I know they played a few games earlier on in the year in the pouring down rain, so that field has taken a toll. But yeah, for the Oaken Bucket, I mean, IU kind of just show that they are still improving for being such a young team. And then it shows also Purdue having to go to a high school to get a 4th-string quarterback because all of theirs are out.
Right.
I guess kind of became the thing that kind of let them down at the end.
Yeah, and I was disappointed for Purdue. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the saying is you want to beat a team at their best so that there's nothing that you can take away from that victory. But you couldn't really help but feel bad for Purdue at the end of that game. Like you said, down to their 4th-string quarterback. It's just got really ugly, and I mean, I'm glad to see Indiana got to celebrate bringing the bucket home back, 2 years in a row now?
I believe so, yes.
So that was really good for them. But in general, nothing too much to report on that. Purdue, or Indiana, is currently projected to go to the Gator Bowl or the Music City Bowl, which vastly different bowl games, if you will.
Sure. Well, Purdue went to the Music City Bowl last year and was blown out by Auburn.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. And that was an emotional game for Purdue with forgive me, I forget his name, the cancer.
Tyler Trent.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really emotional game for them. They went and they played their hearts out, but obviously they were no match against the might of the SEC, that is Auburn.
Absolutely.
All right. We can talk about Paul Bunyan's axe. This one had a lot of things riding on it. A potential playoff berth, Big Ten championship, hopeful. A lot of things going here. Minnesota, Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think this one was interesting. The fact that it still kind of shows Wisconsin's young.
Mm-hmm.
It still shows that they're coach young not only on the field as players but coaching staff wise too.
Yeah.
And PJ Fleck, he's been around but not as long as Paul Chryst. And so Paul Chryst knows what it's like to play these big time games, and he's been successful as well. So yeah, this really just shows a gap in just experience. But this was obviously a great opportunity rather for Minnesota to put them on a national brand.
Yep.
Or to put that name out, that brand out nationally, and people are going to recognize now, and then they won't be taken as lightly as they have been in the past.
Yeah, I think people are now going to see that name and say, "Oh, hey, these guys were ranked. They were ranked highly for at least the end of the season. Up to number 8 for the season." And I think that's going to have huge recruiting implications as well as opponent implications. Well, they were ranked. We can claim this as a big victory, or well, they were ranked. We can claim this as a ranked loss, if you will. So,
sure.
Tanner Morgan, I'm still impressed with this kid. I really like him. He had 296 with 2 touchdowns. And then his favorite target, Rashad Bateman, 6 catches, 147 and a score. Jonathan Taylor doing what he needed to do. 18 carries, 76 yards, 2 scores. Wisconsin just used the ground game against Minnesota. That was Minnesota's real big weakness, especially after halftime. Wisconsin just took it to him on the ground. Jonathan Taylor didn't look that great, didn't break 100 yards, but he got it done when it mattered.
Absolutely. You look at their 38-17 final. Really, Jack Cohen was only 15 of 22 for 280, 2 touchdowns and no picks. The whole no interception thing is it's really big. That's especially in games like that. But he got the ball around to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, almost 10 receivers throughout the game. Or excuse me, that's running backs. 10 running backs ran the ball. 10 players ran the ball. That's what Wisconsin does. They grind him. They put it on the ground and let you go after him, because they do always, every year they have the offensive line and the tailbacks to get the job done. They've been like that since the college football started.
Well, I was going to say, yeah. You look all the way back into the 90s. Wisconsin was known as we're going to pound and pound and pound on the ground. And then when you finally figure out how to stop it, we're going to air it out.
Sure, they've got a Heisman Trophy to prove it, too.
Absolutely.
But yeah, in receiving-wise, too, Cephas had 114 yards on 5 receptions and 1 touchdown.
Yep.
And then Grochak had 1 reception for 70. So really, they were able to spread the ball around a little bit there for the 280 yards.
Yeah, that was it was a good game. The first half, I didn't know what to expect. I was kind of pulling for Minnesota just because it'd be really cool to have a guaranteed playoff spot on the line for the Big Ten championship game, which that's something we can get to here in a minute. But going into halftime, I was really liking that score, and then Wisconsin just blew the doors open.
Yeah, they did. Whatever halftime adjustments they were, Minnesota just couldn't match up to it.
Yep, absolutely. Texas A&M, LSU, not really much to talk about here. 50-7 was the final in favor of LSU.
Yeah. Did you see that video of Burrow coming out before the game?
With the jersey on the back, or the name change.
Yeah. Well, he was coming out of the tunnel, and it looked like the video was in a video game.
Yeah.
The definition was incredible.
Yeah, he looked really comfortable in that game. But I love that they did that video and everybody's cheering him on and applauding him. I like Joe Burrow a lot, and I know I've mentioned it on this podcast before, but I really want to see him succeed. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's a smart kid. He doesn't seem to be one of those kind of cocky guys like a Baker Mayfield or a Johnny Manziel. No offense, Cleveland. But he just seems to, hey, let's go out, let's get the job done.
Yeah, because he knows how big this opportunity is. Because obviously he was in Columbus for 3 years, and he sat behind really good quarterbacks there.
Yeah, it's incredible to think that Ohio State had like 3 or 4 of the best quarterbacks in the country at one point. On that roster.
It was Joey Burrow, Dwayne Haskins, J.T. Barrett, and Cardell Jones.
Yeah, wow. Talk about now looking back how incredible that is.
Right.
So yeah, nothing really to talk about there. LSU did what we expected. They just did it in a big fashion. Cincinnati, Memphis. They're going round 2 this week for the conference championship. But what'd you notice here? That's kind of the one thing I noticed, I guess, that kind of stuck out to me is Memphis got it going early and then did enough in the fourth quarter to punch it out.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. I think Memphis did just enough to hold on to that game at the end because it could have very easily gotten away from them going there in the fourth quarter. Cincinnati started figuring out their offense and started moving the ball a little bit, but I think just not enough time there for Cincinnati to get the W. But as you said, they go back for round 2 here this weekend.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of adjustments they make going into the conference championship game, knowing that the highest ranked group of 5 bowl bid is on the line.
Sure. And, it's one of those things, too, like, obviously, it's an exact repeat of last week. They go back to Memphis. And so it's really, you have the film on them. You know what's really going to happen because you just played them. So it really should be a fairly easy film week. It's just making quick adjustments because, like I said, Cincinnati did figure it out there towards the later end of that game.
The next game that I want to talk about, Ole Miss, Mississippi State.
Yeah, that's a wild one. There's a lot to There's a lot to dissect in that one.
That final score for those listening at home, 21-20 in favor of Mississippi State. But Ole Miss had the chance to win this thing. There were 5 seconds left to go. Ole Miss gets the touchdown. And they miss the extra point attempt because Elijah Moore goes to the end zone and celebrates. Not just a, hey, let's get together, let's celebrate as a group, whatever. No, he gets an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty for getting down on the ground like a dog and motioning that he was urinating. Yeah, and that's what cost them.
Doing the fire hydrant drill.
Yeah. And why would you do that? I get it. There's 4 seconds left in the game. You could potentially tie this thing. But why would you do that? Wait until your kicker makes the, field goal, whatever it is. And that's what decided this thing.
Yeah, that was tough. Especially, you see that stuff in Cleveland, the dog pound, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I saw that and it was good for social media. I mean, social media
Very
had
good.
A field day with it. But yeah, that's something you can't do. And I'm sure Coach had a long talk with him after the game.
I'm sure he did, and it's heartbreaking to see, especially when you have the chance to tie it and send it into overtime, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel bad for the kid, but you got to be better. You got to think
one
about
thing
it.
we didn't mention earlier, now that we this brings it back, is Alabama missed a late field goal there to win that in the Iron Bowl as well.
Yes, they did.
Which I totally spaced that up until now.
Yeah, they missed that field goal, and then Auburn was just moving the ball well enough. I think they got a 2-point conversion at one point.
Yeah.
To put them ahead 3. So
yeah, that's what it was.
That was critical.
That kicker missing that reminded me of that, and I totally spaced it.
Mm-hmm. I think it would have tied it, right? That's what it would have done?
Yeah.
We'll skip a couple games here. Clemson, South Carolina. Not much to really take away from that except, oh look, Clemson won like they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And they won in a big fashion. Trevor Lawrence, 300 yards, 3 scores. Clemson doing what Clemson been doing all year. They taking it away and then coasting in the second half.
Pretty much what they've done. I mean, that did almost cost them against North Carolina, but really after that they found their stride and they haven't slowed down.
Right. And I think that everybody wants to talk about, oh well, Georgia lost to South Carolina. Well, it's an SEC game. That doesn't matter. I think Clemson doing what they did to South Carolina kind of strengthens their case for the playoffs a little bit, because of the fact that, sure, you go back, you run back South Carolina, Georgia, 100 times, Georgia's going to win it 95% of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's that one time that costs them. And everybody wants to talk about, oh, the ACC is weak. Yes, the ACC is weak. But Clemson showed its strength, flexed its muscles against a middling South Carolina team from the SEC. And I think it bodes well for them, makes them look a little bit more favorable.
Sure.
Oklahoma State, not really too much there. Oklahoma, 34-16, kind of ran away with that one late. Oklahoma State only got 3 points after halftime.
Yeah.
Oklahoma did their job, kept their playoff hopes alive. Not really much for me on that one.
No, not at all. Drew Brown, Oklahoma State's quarterback, was 22 of 32 for 207 with one pick. But Kennedy Brooks, Oklahoma's running back, had $160 on the ground with 22 carries and one touchdown.
Yeah, he looked really smooth, really fluid. He ran really hard in that game.
They were able. Oklahoma they did a pretty good job of containing Chuba Hubbard there, because Hubbard only had he had 104 yards on 24 carries, but only one touchdown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was really impressed with their way to prevent him from scoring. Sure, he got a lot of yards. There was that whole bend don't break kind of defense against him, and they really bottled him up and kept themselves in the lead, and that was really cool to see, especially with their hopes of getting into the playoffs. That's now another quality win against a quality opponent. So, yeah, good for Oklahoma, doing what they needed to do to keep those playoff hopes alive.
Yeah, because they came in sixth in the rankings today, right behind Utah.
Yes.
And so Utah, I watched a little bit of that game, and they looked good.
That defense is nasty.
They are. I think they lead the country in points, rushing yards.
That
given
sounds
up, the defense
right.
is like 50-some yards a game.
Their points points against 11.3 points a game, which is really good.
And like 58 yards rushing or something like that.
58 yards rushing. Total yards allowed, they are third behind Ohio State and Clemson, and the difference between Ohio State and Utah is less than 10 yards.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's
of course,
that's impressive.
It's a Pac-12 team in the middle of nowhere that nobody hears about.
Yeah. Again, us East Coasters don't watch that West Coast football. It's too late for us.
Yeah.
So, but
and
no,
I felt
good
bad
for
for
Utah.
Hawaii, or I felt bad for Army traveling all the way to Hawaii and not kicking off here till midnight our time.
Yeah, that was nuts.
That's
and
brutal.
They ended up winning that game, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was a long road trip for them. I think we talked about it last week too, but a lot of fun for those kids, I'm sure, getting that opportunity to play out west in a beautiful stadium, in a beautiful area. So super happy to see that for them for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. The last one we got to talk about, because we said we'd talk about it last week.
You've been avoiding this one all day.
We can skip this one. It's not really that important if we want
I'd like to talk about it.
Okay, that's fine, I guess. Ohio State at Michigan.
I just love hearing Michigan fans' misery. It's really fun.
Fair.
I think I spent all day Sunday just going through Twitter and just seeing fans complain. It was phenomenal.
Well, for those who follow our website, I wrote an article after Michigan got blown out by Wisconsin about how Jim Harbaugh needs to go. I echo that sentiment to this day, but we can talk about the game. We don't need to talk about that article. We can talk about the game. Ohio State, 14 points a quarter, looked really good on offense. Defense was a little shaky in the first half.
Just a little bit. The Buckeyes starting corner, Sean Wade, was out. So it was Reed who came in, and he really hadn't played much this year, so they kind of attacked him early. But he had the last laugh because he did seal the game with a pick. Yeah,
no, he looked really good. That defense, like I said, in the second half, they really tightened things down. But
and they bear hugged Chase Young all day.
They did. They really did. And I think anybody who is going to play Ohio State in the postseason needs to watch that film and then execute it even better. Chase Young was not a factor whatsoever. He had 2 hurries all afternoon. And Chase Young's still a phenomenal player, one of the best players in college football.
Yeah, he won the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year award today.
Yes, he did. I saw that. That was good for him. He definitely earned that. Even with his suspension, he definitely earned that, and he played really, really well. But I think if you're any team who is significantly better than the University of Michigan at football, you need to look at this film, dissect it, and say, what did they do to neutralize Chase Young? But also, how can we prevent everybody else from getting to our quarterback, getting to our running backs? Mm-hmm. Michigan gave you the formula, even if they couldn't hold it up for 4 quarters. Michigan has given the country the formula on how to neutralize Chase Young. And sure, it's a double team. But now you've got those coaches at Clemson, at LSU. Wisconsin has an extra week to prepare. Now they have this film on how to neutralize that. It'll be really interesting to see his impact down the road.
Yeah, it is. There we go. One of those things, too, I'm kind of looking at the numbers here. Fields and Patterson, Fields had 302 yards, and Patterson had 305. So really, the big difference there is the 4 touchdowns, no picks, to the 1 touchdown and 1 pick. Mm-hmm. A QBR of 88.8 for Fields and 27.9 there for Patterson.
Yeah.
And then Chuganoff came in for a couple plays because Fields went out hurt. He was a 1 of 2 for 11 yards. But the big thing was, too, J.K. Dobbins, he's still running in the big house right now. 31 carries, 211 yards, 4 touchdowns. His longest was 41. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just – and Fields, I mean, he only had 25 yards rushing. That's low for him.
Yeah, that was uncharacteristically low. The Michigan front 4 really kind of kept Fields in the backfield. He didn't really get the chance to scramble and do much of what he likes to do.
And the one thing, too, the Ohio State offensive line averages 40 more pounds than the Michigan defensive line.
Yeah, which makes that even much more impressive, right? That Fields was contained in the backfield. Now, J.K. Dobbins obviously ran at will. It's like, just give me the ball, I'll run 15 yards, whatever.
Sure. And then, obviously, Garrett Wilson, who's a true freshman who was playing high school football this time last year, had only 3 receptions for $118, 1 touchdown. Chris Olave kept doing his thing with 68 yards. J.K. Dobbins at 49. J.K.'s 2 catches were huge. They're both short out of the backfield catches, but he was able to his longest was 28 yards.
Yep.
And that took the Buckeyes into the red zone. Their Austin Mack, my Fort Wayne guy, had 3 receptions for 39 yards, 1 touchdown. KJ Hill, I think the Buckeyes are like a ridiculous amount and the record-wise when KJ Hill scores a touchdown.
Yep, absolutely. And that was it was you continue to look at the numbers. Master Teague, he had 12 carries for 29 yards. Not a big difference maker, but he gave J.K. Dobbins enough of a breather to show a different look, to get a different defense on the field.
Sure.
You saw Master Teague on the field. Okay, they're probably passing. Ohio State surprised the Michigan defense by running with him a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Master Teague's one of the top 5 rushers in the Big Ten right now, too. Mm-hmm. As a backup.
Yeah, so you look at it and you think, he just runs those disguise packages really, really well.
Mm-hmm. He's built identically to J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah.
So Master Teague right here has 128 carries for 780 yards, 4 touchdowns as a backup.
That's insane. The tail here, and I'm looking at team stats. Shea Patterson, Michigan had 305 yards passing, Ohio State 313, so pretty even there. Save the touchdowns. The rushing was the difference. Ohio State outgained Michigan 264 to 91 yards on the ground. That was, to me, obviously there was a fumble by Michigan late in the second quarter that would have tied it up. Yeah. But I was really impressed with Ohio State in all facets of the game. I think they looked really, really solid. Michigan was definitely the underdog, and I think in the second half they played much more like it. Receivers were all of a sudden forgetting how to catch the ball. Everything just looked out of sorts, and Ohio State capitalized. I thought Ohio State was going to come out slow in the third quarter, like they've done when they've had when these starters haven't really had to play.
Right. You saw it against Penn State.
Yeah, and so I was as a fan, I was kind of hopeful that that's what was going to happen. However, you can't expect that. It's not a guarantee. And Justin Fields came out, looked really solid. J.K. Dobbins again. That team is just complete top to bottom. And as a Michigan fan, I hate to say it, but Ohio State has the best team not only in the Big Ten, but I definitely think the country. Save maybe LSU.
Yeah, I'm excited here once the final playoff rankings come out. First off, I can't look ahead past Wisconsin.
No, absolutely not.
I'll be at that game this weekend. I'm very excited about it. And it's one of those things where Wisconsin's gotten better. They're ranked 8th now. They broke the top 10 tonight. They moved up 4 spots.
And
so
that's really interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Do we want to talk rankings or do we want to talk championships?
You're probably just tired of talking about this game, aren't you?
I mean, we can keep talking about this game. That's fine.
I can talk about it all day long, but you won't like it. So
I'd like to move on.
No, that's what I thought. That's fine.
No, let's look at these college football rankings. They announced the college football playoff rankings earlier this evening. Ohio State secured at number 1, LSU following in at number 2, followed by Clemson at 3, Georgia at 4, Utah and Oklahoma at 5 and 6, Baylor in at 7, Wisconsin at 8, Florida at 9, Penn State at 10. So we've got 3 Big Ten teams in the top 10. We've got
four in the top 15.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Big Ten's representing really, really well. I'm surprised Michigan didn't drop any more because Michigan was 13 last week. I'm really surprised they only dropped to 14. But I think the rankings kind of gave Michigan a pass, if you will. Everybody's been losing to Ohio State in this fashion.
Right. And one thing I'm curious about, too, is why is there an AP top 25 still?
Good question.
It doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything because there's no more BCS.
Right. So is it just something for the writers to do?
I think it's something for the writers to do, honestly. Okay. And I mean, if you look, the college football rankings, save a few notable ones, kind of parallel the AP rankings as well. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't want to say it's like a guideline, like, hey, this is kind of where we have them, but I think it's something that they really look at. The ranking that really interests me, Alabama, not only out of the top 5, out of the top 10 in the college football playoff rankings.
It's the lowest they've ever been.
Yeah, in the last several years.
Since the playoffs started, they fell back 7 spots, and Auburn's ahead of them in 11th.
Yeah, so they probably realize we can't put a 3-loss Auburn team in the top 10, so we'll just put them at 11, and then we'll just drop Alabama below them.
Yeah. Minnesota took a huge hit and fell 10 spots to 18.
I felt really bad for Minnesota on that. That game was closer than the score indicated.
Yeah, they really got hammered there.
They did. Then you've got, rounding out the top 25, you got Cincinnati at 20, only dropped 2 spots. Memphis didn't move up. No, Memphis moved up a spot.
Moved at 1, yeah.
You got Appalachian State at 21, USC at 22, Virginia at 23, Navy 24, Oklahoma State at 25. I'm really kind of surprised to not see Indiana crack the top 25 again, but that's another thing for another time.
Yeah.
I think these rankings, there's a lot on the line, and this will tie into our conference championship segment. But I think there's a lot on the line, especially with those top 2 seeds. Ohio State, if they lose to Wisconsin, there's a small argument to be made that Wisconsin should make the playoffs. I don't think they should. They're a 2-loss program. I don't think any 2-loss program has any reason.
If something crazy happens and Ohio State loses, they're still in either way.
You think so?
They're not going to drop out. The only thing that'll switch is they might go to 4, LSU to 1, Georgia 3, Clemson 2. The way I was listening to the show earlier, and Palmer and Joey Galloway were talking about it. They go, essentially, the 4th spot is a spot up for grabs right now. Because Ohio State's in, LSU's in, Clemson's in, and the 4th spot is up for grabs. And it makes sense, too, when you look at the strength, schedule, quality, wins, etc. Obviously, if LSU beats Georgia like we think what'll happen, that opens the door for Utah. They're going to have to beat Oregon. And then there's no Pac-12 or Big 12 championship, is there? Oh, yeah, it's Oklahoma-Baylor, right?
It's a quasi-championship. They take the top 2 teams of the conference have them play again.
That's right. I forgot about that.
So now here's my question for you. So you've got, let's say LSU beats Georgia, which is a safe bet right now. Let's say LSU beats Georgia. You've got Utah, Oklahoma, and Baylor. Let's say, who do you put in if Oklahoma and Utah win? Or if Utah and Baylor win, who do you put in at that number 4 spot?
Utah.
You think so?
I think that they're the better overall team.
Even though, even if Oklahoma wins.
Even if Oklahoma wins. Okay, let's take a look at this here. If Oklahoma wins,
I think
I think
Oklahoma has a better schedule.
I do, but I think if you put Utah, it's a win against a top 15 team.
Right, but if you put Oklahoma, it's now a win against a top 10 team.
That's it, about 10 team, yeah.
That's a tough one. It really is.
Yeah.
I obviously this is the weekend chaos.
I still think Utah.
Okay. I think it's interesting. You've got 2 conference championships where it's red versus green. Baylor, Oklahoma, and Utah, Oregon.
And you got to watch this too. Baylor lost that game against Oklahoma a few weeks ago.
True.
I mean, they let it get away from them, really. They let that game all the way until deep into the fourth quarter, and they just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
So I doubt something like that happens this week.
Now, here's the real question. 28-3, do you think that's going to come back to haunt them? Is that going to be all they're going to be hearing in practice all week?
I don't think so. I think Coach Rule has a good, they're 10-11 for a reason, or excuse me, 10-11, 11-1 for a reason. And that one loss is to Oklahoma.
Okay.
So I don't think it'll be that big of an emphasis this week.
Okay.
Because they know they know it's going to be, life or death really, to hopefully secure that 4th spot. But I don't think they're having issues with that now.
All right, so we'll go down in order here. Utah, Oregon kicks off the conference championship weekend on Friday night.
That's Friday night, yeah.
So Oregon's job right now, just win. Or not Oregon, Utah's job. Sorry, Utah.
Pretty much, that's all you have
job.
to do. That would be the worst, though. Winning on Friday night and having to sit around all weekend long, all day Saturday.
Cheering against. I don't know. I think you cheer against Baylor because if Oklahoma beats Baylor, that's less impressive, I think, than if Baylor beats Oklahoma. Then you cheer against Georgia because LSU wins. That secures you a spot. And then really, if you cheer against Clemson, because they're taking on number 23 Virginia, you open it up so that you have that potential to sneak in. I don't think Clemson, if they lose to Virginia, makes the playoffs. I think based off of their strength of schedule, everybody's already been down on them this year anyway. You lose to Virginia, who is 9-3, sitting at 23 in the country. You lose that game, you don't make the playoffs.
That's a possibility. Yeah, with the way Clemson they've had a few close ones this year. The defense has looked suspect, but yeah, I could see a scenario like that.
All right, so we got Baylor, Oklahoma. So let's go down. We'll just do picks here. I like Utah in this game. I think Utah is a much more complete team, and Justin Herbert hasn't seen a defense quite like Utah's yet.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'm right there with you.
Okay, so Saturday, the noontime slot, we've got Baylor, Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma takes this one. I really do. Jalen Hurts is looking really good. You like Baylor? Okay.
I like Baylor now. There's something about Corey Brewer that I like.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. And you think he can bounce back from this one?
I think so, too. Yeah. Because, that program has risen from the ashes in a pretty quick amount of time.
Okay.
Yeah, they obviously they had damn near had the death penalty a couple years ago.
Right.
And Coach Rule comes in and takes care of it. First year they struggled, but now they found their stride. They're looking in the top 10 now. They're moving the football pretty well.
Absolutely. That's fair. Down at the Sun Belt Conference Championship, we have Louisiana taking on Appalachian State. I like Appy. Sorry.
Yeah, so do I. That's one of those teams that ever since they joined FCS, it's like okay, they're gonna stick around here for a little while.
Mm-hmm. And they're the one consistent team out of the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt we've talked about being probably the weakest conference in, save Conference USA, the weakest conference in 1A football. But Appalachian State's been their lone bright spot.
Yeah, absolutely. They're the one name that everybody knows.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to our conference, the Mid-American, we got Miami taking on Central Michigan.
I have Central in that one.
You got Central? I like Miami.
Yeah, because Ball State handed it to Miami this past weekend.
They really did, but Ball State handed it to a lot of people and then got it handed right back.
Yeah.
I
think too. This is technically a home game too for Central.
It is. They're not traveling too far. Miami's got to really pack up their fans and bring them on up north. I think I like Miami in this one just because of Brett Gabbert. He's looked pretty solid all year. Although Jonathan Ward for Central Michigan, dude's got 15 scores on the year, 164 carries, over 1,000 yards rushing. I I think this is going to be more of an offensive game than it is a defensive game. But I really like Miami just because I think that they play a slightly better schedule, so they're going to be more battle-tested for the weekend.
Yeah, that makes sense.
1:30 down at Conference USA, we got University of Alabama Birmingham. I think that's
UAB.
Yeah, UAB taking on Florida Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I'm going with the Fighting Kiffins.
Okay, I like it. I like the pick for Florida Atlantic, and that's kind of where I was leaning as well. Chris Robinson looks pretty solid at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got 3,000 yards on the season, 22 scores. They only had one loss in conference. I mean, that whole team looks pretty good. Their out-of-conference schedule was whatever, but they look pretty good in Conference USA play this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's they have, and I think, where are we at here? Lost my spot. What game were we talking about again?
UAB, Florida Atlantic.
UAB, that's right. My gosh, and UAB too is a team that didn't have a program a couple years ago.
Yeah, they just bounced back.
It's been 2 years? They've been back 2 years now.
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously they've had some NFL talent come out of the Roddy White a couple years ago. Went to Atlanta, came from there, but I still think Lane Kiffin, his guys over there, they're going to do well. And their offensive coordinator too is Charlie Weiss's kid.
Yeah.
He's like 25.
Mm-hmm. Interesting thing to note. Florida Atlantic is scoring 34 points a game.
Yeah.
Giving up 24 essentially. While UAB is scoring 25, giving up 18-5. So I don't want to say UAB's got a better defense. Maybe just a weaker schedule.
Mm-hmm. That's one of those teams too that their their non-conference schedule isn't like the greatest,
right?
Because obviously Florida Atlantic travels to Columbus, they travel to Ball State, places like that. So and of course Ball State wasn't too big; they beat them pretty handily. But coming to Columbus and getting waxed, they're a little more battle tested, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, their biggest losses were to Marshall, lost by 5. They're on a 5-game winning streak right now. Beating Southern Miss, UTSA, Florida International, Western Kentucky, Old Dominion, by some pretty hefty scores. It's not been a weak schedule for Florida Atlantic, so I really like Florida Atlantic in this one. I think that they take that conference and run away with it.
I think so.
Cincinnati, Memphis, American Athletic. Rematch of this last week. I think Memphis does it again.
See, I'm taking Cincy. I like Luke Fickell. I don't think he allows his guys to lose 2 in a row because their only 2 losses this year are Ohio State and Memphis. So I don't think he loses another one on the road in Memphis.
Okay. That'll be interesting to see. That game's at 3:30 on ABC, so that'll be fun to watch. I really hope that there's some really, really good football being played there. Like you said, Luke Fickell is a smart coach. I don't think he allows them to lose 2. But I just really like Brady White from Memphis. That kid is a monster at QB. And Kenneth Gainwell, the running back there. Sure, he's only got 12 scores, 1,300 yards on the season, but he's smart with how he plays. He doesn't need to run a lot when the rest of his team is giving him the opportunity to relax.
Sure.
So, I don't know. It'll be an interesting game. If Memphis wins that, they're almost guaranteed to take that top spot for the Group of 5.
And Memphis' coach, too, he's one of those guys who's going to be on everybody's radar this year for a big-time job.
Looking at you, Michigan. Anyway, moving on to the 4 o'clock time slot, we've got the SEC Championship game. This is a game a lot of people are going to be paying attention to. Georgia, LSU. I think Joey Burrow and company get it done.
I think so too, but I think it's going to be closer than what people think. Georgia has a pretty solid defense. They've been playing pretty well here as of late. I think it'll be a lower scoring game, but probably a field goal or a turnover, something like that's going to decide the finish.
Big thing of note: this is basically a home game for Georgia.
Sure,
it's at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They're in Atlanta, so I think LSU, they're going to be fighting a hostile crowd. I think LSU does get it done, but I do like the idea that it's going to be a closer score than expected. I think LSU wins it probably by 10.
Yeah, for 10. I can see that.
We've got Hawaii taking on Boise State in Boise for the Mountain West Championship. I think it's really hard to bet against Boise right now.
Yeah, Boise does look really good, and it's an old adage too. Traveling west to east to play football, it's tough.
Mm-hmm. Those time zones really mess with you, especially with Hawaii being like 4 time zones difference.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's tough. So I think Boise wipes the floor with Hawaii in that one. Night games. These are the fun ones. Virginia, Clemson. Clemson does the job. It's taking place in Charlotte, North Carolina at the Bank of America Stadium.
Yeah, Clemson's 20.5 point favorites right now, over under 55.5.
Yeah, that's gross.
Well, speaking of over-unders, the over-under for Hawaii, Boise State's 65.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a high-scoring affair for sure. Mm-hmm. Boise State's favored by 14. So, I don't know. That'll be interesting. I think Clemson runs away with it. I think they run away with it in the first half and then just kind of hit cruise control in the second half until their defense gets in trouble.
Yeah. Because we mentioned LSU Georgia here. LSU's only it's -7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be a close one. Memphis is -9. So yeah, those afternoon games are going to be really, really tight. Save the Boise State game. It looks like. Yeah, but I like Clemson in this one. They just look to be a far more complete team than Virginia. Virginia doesn't hold a candle to them, I don't think, especially with who they've lost to. They've lost by 15 to Notre Dame. They had a weird loss to Miami, Florida, and then they lost to Louisville. Looks like the tale for them this year is losing on the road. Looks like they don't lose at home, but on the road is where they kind of falter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do struggle there on the road for sure.
We got in the 8 o'clock time slot, the game that you are going to be at, and I'm excited to hear about it.
Yes.
Big Ten Championship,
Yep.
Wisconsin versus Ohio State.
Yeah, looking at the numbers here, obviously over under 56.5. Ohio State's favored 16.5. That's dropped a little bit over the past couple of days, but I think it's gonna be closer than what people think. Wisconsin, obviously, it's a 1 versus 8. Wisconsin has played us already. Jonathan Taylor had 10 yards when we played him last time, and it seems like, and Chase Young had 12 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those things too where I don't think Wisconsin's going to allow that to happen again because they do have the athletes to prevent that from happening.
Right.
But being a neutral field, Ohio State travels extremely well. Every time I've been to the Big Ten Championship 4 or 5 times, and every time I go, it's 85% Ohio State fans because Columbus is only a 2.5 hour drive down I-70, so it's not not that far. And the games I've been to, Northwestern last year, they didn't really travel very well. Wisconsin, they bring a pretty decent crowd. When Sparty came down, they brought a pretty big crowd in 2013. And then when Ohio State beat Wisconsin 59-0 in 14 rather, they brought a pretty nice crowd too because that was the year Wisconsin was supposed to do it. And then we of course do a third string quarterback, yada yada yada. The story, the rest is history. But 12-0, 10-2. It's going to be closer to what I think what people think, but the Buckeyes do come out with a win.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ohio State tightens up everything they need to. They've got film on themselves from the Michigan game, which I think is so critical for them. I think they take it away early in the first half. They're forcing Wisconsin to throw in the second half, effectively neutralizing Jonathan Taylor. So I don't think it'll happen. I think Ohio State handles that and rides home with yet another Big Ten championship and yet another playoff berth.
Another one, but I mean, I was talking about this at work today with somebody. My friend is an Ohio State alum, and she has no worries about it. I'm sitting there, I'm like, it's a championship game. Playoff hopes are on the line again because obviously when they played together the first time, playoff hopes were on the line then. Mm-hmm. So it's still the same situation now. For Wisconsin, I don't think they're gonna jump into the top 4, but they can get a 5.
Yeah,
I think they can get a 5 or a 6 and get in there and play at a Rose Bowl.
Absolutely,
which was huge for Wisconsin. Don't get me wrong, that's enormous for anybody.
Yeah, the Rose Bowl is still a premier game. It's
sure
it's a consolation prize, but it's still, it's the granddaddy of them all.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think the Buckeyes come away with the win there.
All right, I like it. I can respect that, and I agree with that. On Sunday we have America's game, Army versus Navy. Not a conference championship, but it's a big rivalry game.
That's next week. That's the 14th.
Oh yeah, that's right. That is the 14th. Never mind.
Yeah,
So
they take a week off.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah, they take a week off.
So, but yeah, that wraps up the conference championship games. We do have a few mailbag questions I wanted to kind of touch on. A couple people on Twitter reaching out.
Yeah, you guys
to
are
us.
blowing up my Twitter notifications at work yesterday.
Sorry. You got tagged. That's my fault. I'm going to take full blame for that.
It happens.
But no, we had a couple really good questions coming into. If I can pull them up really quick, tweets and replies. Yes, so we had a couple really good questions. One of them was, who has the best college football rivalry trophies in the sport, and what are some of our favorites? I answered on the Twitter page. Personally, being partial with being a MAC fan, I think Akron-Kent State, the battle for the wagon wheel, I think that's one of the coolest things. It's a giant wagon wheel, for those who don't know. And this, it's a legit wagon wheel. It's not some little tiny trophy. It's a giant wagon wheel where they have all the scores and who won over the course of the rivalry. Minnesota, Wisconsin, I really like for the Axe. Notre Dame, USC, and I don't know how to pronounce this. Jeweled Shalag. I think that's how that's pronounced. Notre Dame, USC fans, please don't find me. I don't live in Toledo. I don't exist, so please don't kill me for butchering that. But I really think that thing looks really cool. There's a lot of history with that. Also, just because I'm a MAC fan, and everybody can make fun of me for this, I really like the Toledo Bowling Green rivalry trophy. It's a giant bronze Interstate 75 placard, essentially, mounted on a square base. And it's the newest trophy. They replaced the peace pipe from a couple years ago. And BG finally got to see what that trophy looked like this year after, I think, 7 years of not knowing what it looked like. And I think it's one of the coolest trophies out there. It's just this bronze plaque, and I just think it's kind of cool. So what about you?
I'll stick with the MAC too a little bit. I mean, the Redbird Trophy between Ball State and Miami of Ohio. That's a good one. I always liked Iowa, Minnesota, the pig.
Oh, the Floyd of Rosedale.
Floyd of Rosedale, yeah. How it was actually a real pig back in the day. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, Paul Bunyan's axe is always really cool. I'm trying to think. Oh, the cowboy hat between Oklahoma State, Texas. Oklahoma, Texas.
Yeah.
The golden cowboy hat, that's really cool as well.
What do you think of the Illabuck?
The Illabuck is cool, but it's just one of those things you just don't. Obviously, they don't play every year,
right?
So it's like, you kind of forget about it when they play. They go, oh yeah, that's the thing.
There's a trophy here.
Yeah, that's. I mean, obviously, it used to be a real turtle back in the day too.
Yeah.
And see, I just forgot all about it until you mentioned it. I go, oh yeah, I forgot just because they play each other every other year,
absolutely,
or so. So yeah, that is a fun one though.
Yeah, so those are great trophies. We got another one. Is Joe?
Oh, hold on, time out.
Go ahead.
During bowl season,
yes,
we need to do an episode on bowl trophies.
I'm 100% down with that
because there are some really cool ones.
There are some really cool ones, for sure.
In 2004, I went to the Alamo Bowl, Ohio State, Oklahoma State. It was Les Miles last year at Oklahoma State.
Yeah,
and it was so cool because last year I was in Columbus. We went to the Woody Hayes Center, the Woody Hayes facility, and the trophy case is in there. And I saw the trophy from that game up close. And that was when the MasterCard, I think, it was...
Yeah, the MasterCard.
MasterCard or Discovery Card, one of the two sponsored it back then.
Okay.
And it was a sweet-looking trophy.
Okay.
And it looked cool because I was like, 10 back then, or 10 or 12 when we went.
Right.
But seeing it 20 years later, I was like, okay, this thing's really cool looking.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do one of those.
Definitely have to do bowl game trophies.
Absolutely. We can do a bowl game pick'em too. And
we'll do that. Also, bowl game gifts that players get.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I've got stories from people I know who played for that team up north.
Okay.
Chris Wormley, who you know, and Dan Samuelson. He went to my high school. They both played up there, and some of the things he was telling me they'd got were incredible. So we'll wait till bowl season to talk about that also.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfectly fine. I'm excited to dive into that a little bit. Another question we got, is Joe Burrow winning the Heisman? I think right now he's the clear front runner. He has to completely fall to pieces in the conference championship, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's pretty much his to lose at this point.
We don't need to really go over any more with that. What coaches need to have a strong showing in their bowl game to stave off the hot seat pressure going to next year. I don't know if anybody fits that criteria, but I think if I would pick a coach who people are looking at a little unfavorably right now, whether it's fairly or not, I think Nick Saban needs a strong bowl performance. I think he's fine. I don't think he's on the hot seat, but I do think that Nick Saban is feeling a little bit of pressure like, oh man, I've lost 2 regular season games for the first time in however many years. If I lose a bowl game, what does that really say about this organization?
Sure. I think my coach is Clay Helton at USC.
Yeah, okay.
That's interesting because everybody's talking, they want to get rid of him, but he has him ranked.
Mm-hmm.
And he has them winning football games right now. They're in the top 25.
Yeah.
I think they're sitting there at, 24, I think it is?
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, 24.
22,
whatever it is. Yeah, and they beat UCLA this year.
Yeah, 22.
They beat Cal. They have some quality wins, and they got shellacked by Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
But, they took Notre Dame to the wire, lost by 3. BYU lost by 3. They beat Utah this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know really. I don't really understand. Yeah, I don't really understand what what the issue is with him for the simple fact that they want Urban Meyer, and Urban Meyer's not going to take that job. Everybody knows that. He's never going to coach again.
No, he's going to the Cowboys.
Yeah, when Jerry Jones opens up that bank account.
Right.
But yeah, Notre Dame, they obviously lost to Notre Dame in the rival by 3, but then you beat UCLA. So really, Clay Helton, if he can win out, I don't know if it's going to save his job, but it's going to make it harder for USC
to get rid of him.
Because they did I don't know if he was fired or resigned, but their AD earlier this year left as well. So maybe that was kind of the sign, but who knows at this point.
We got another. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important for him to really, as long as he wins, he's fine. And I think
so too.
This bowl, if he wins this bowl game, like you said, it makes that argument really hard to get rid of him. Like, look, he's got 9 wins on the season. It's really hard to argue against that. We've got another one from our cousins, the Beard Brothers Fantasy Football Podcast.
I've got issues with those guys too. We'll talk about that later.
I'm excited to hear this. They said, why is X-Ishigan so bad? I don't know who this X-Ishigan is, so that seems like a dumb question.
I get it.
But no, why is Michigan so bad? Why is Ohio State far superior? I know.
I can answer this in two seconds. I really can.
I believe you. Go for it.
It's Ohio State takes it more serious.
Yeah.
Ohio State, they train every practice. There's a Michigan hour or a Michigan session. Urban Meyer, every Wednesday, he would go into his office and watch film on them. He knew what they were doing every week. Mm-hmm. Jim Harbaugh's not doing that.
No.
And the week of the game, the scout team gets in Michigan uniforms.
Wow.
And they practice. Yeah.
That I didn't know. That's
wow. Oh yeah, they've been doing that forever.
Okay.
And so they just take it more serious. It's obviously they went down there, scored a touchdown, missed a field goal. That was the end of the game right there. Mm-hmm. That was it.
Yeah.
Because they weren't gonna you can't recover from that.
No, absolutely.
And so Ohio State takes it more serious. And there's a reason why it's 5-0. There's a reason why Jim Harbaugh got snarky in his press conference when he couldn't answer a simple question.
Yeah. And I took issue with that as well. The guy Jordan Strack is actually a WTLL reporter.
Jordan's really that was Jordan who answered that or asked that question.
Yeah, that was Jordan Strack.
Okay, I know Jordan. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, no, and he's super smart. And everybody's like, "Oh, he's an Ohio State fan because he's from Toledo." No, he was asking a legitimate question.
Yeah, I thought it was a legitimate question.
I thought
he's
so
like,
too.
"Oh, I'm not going to answer your insults." Well, you're being paid $7.5 million a year and have nothing to show for it.
Your fans want to know more.
Yeah, when you interview for that job, you're asked 2 questions. And the first question is, how are you going to beat our rival?
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't done that. He's been close once. He's given up 118 points in 2 years.
118 points in 2 years, and I think, and this is kind of what I replied to the Beard Brothers, and I said, look, Don Brown's defenses all year have played pretty well, save Wisconsin. Ohio State's just on a completely different tier than not only Michigan, but the rest of the Big Ten and pretty much everybody else in the country. They're just, Ohio State's just dominating everybody. It's not one team. They've been a consistent product like this. You look at Ohio State top to bottom, there's no glaring weakness. And even the weaknesses that they have, they cover up really, really well.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like, it's just they take it seriously and they practice for it, and they develop their players better because they have more draft picks, in recent years than Michigan does.
I saw a thing today. Michigan, 71 4 and 5 star recruits.
Yeah.
Ohio State 68 or 69 or something.
Yeah.
But their draft picks, Ohio State had 18, Michigan had 4.
Yeah.
It's not getting talent, it's developing.
Sure, and Michigan goes to Ole Miss and gets Shea Patterson as a transfer. Well, we go out and get Justin Fields, and there's a major talent gap right there. Shea Patterson was supposed to be the saving grace of Michigan football, and has nothing to show for it. Justin Fields comes in one year and is a Heisman Trophy contender.
Yeah. No, it's
so that's all. It's all player development.
Absolutely, it is. One last question. In our opinion, what coach or coaches have impressed us this season the most?
PJ Fleck's on my list. I will say Ryan Day, because he did take over for Urban Meyer, and for able to keep
the living legend.
Yeah, a future Hall of Fame coach, and to be able to keep up what he built, going 12-0 and winning Big Ten Coach of the Year, and that is saying something. It's not easy to do no matter who you are. Matt Rule's on that list, I think, also.
Matt Rule is definitely on that list. I really like Ed
Orgeron.
Yeah, from LSU.
Oh, yeah. He's good.
Turned that program around.
Yeah, he has. And, we can go even to the disappointing side. Chip Kelly, or UCLA. Yep. He's in their second year, hasn't really done a whole lot. Oh, another coach who, I'm excited about this year's too is Herm Edwards.
Yes, he looks really, really smart.
Yeah, and of course Arizona State's one of the schools we forget about. But Herm Edwards, he's got that program in the up and up right now.
Shout out to our friend Brittany, by the way, Arizona State alumni.
Brittany. Absolutely. So yeah, it's really, and all the other good coaches are names that have been around.
Absolutely.
I'll even throw Paul Chryst in there.
Yeah, I think Paul Chryst is super underrated this year.
I think so too, and he's such a typical Wisconsin coach. It's hysterical.
Well, yeah, no, he very much fits that whole mold.
Of course, he played quarterback there, and it was like he was that guy, but he just looks like somebody from Wisconsin. He talks like somebody from Wisconsin. It's hysterical.
I do want to touch on some college hoops just for a quick moment.
Yeah.
Biggest thing, to kind of bring Michigan fans back into listening to our podcast. Big jump for the Wolverines this last weekend after winning the Battle for Atlantis Classic.
They did, but they just lost to Louisville.
Yes, they did. They just lost to number 1 Louisville. But that's the biggest jump in the 70-year history of the AP poll for a team.
Yeah.
So congrats. I mean, they've been doing it the right way.
Yeah, I think we moved up to 6.
Yeah, Ohio State moved up to 6.
Yeah, we play UNC tomorrow.
What's his name? Xavier Simpson for U of M. Went to my high school, actually.
Oh, nice.
And that kid is just so smart with what he does and how he plays basketball.
Yeah.
I just think that Michigan as a team as a whole, losing this one game to number 1 Louisville, not going to be a big deal.
No.
They look so dominant in every other game they've played. They're going to be fine. Sure, they'll probably drop a spot or two.
And there's one guy I met. He played at Whitmer, played at Wisconsin.
Okay.
Played basketball. I cannot think of his name, but he was at Wisconsin for 12 years, it seemed like.
Okay.
He's from Toledo Whitmer. And I'd met him once. Super nice guy. But Toledo's an underrated town when it comes to basketball.
They really
put
are.
some guys out.
Well, Ohio as a general rule is an underrated state when it comes to basketball, I think. And I think you look at schools from the Toledo area, Cincinnati area, Cleveland area, even you get the smaller areas like Dayton or Lima. Those cities, they may not dominate, but they're going to produce
Upper
quality.
Sandusky.
Yeah, Upper Sandusky.
Where the Diebler went, where he's from.
Yep. Finley has produced some solid players. Yeah. I'm trying to think who that guy was from Whitmer.
I'll text Chris and ask.
Nigel Hayes.
Najee Hayes. Yep. Yeah, he was there for 12 years. It seemed like.
Yeah, he went to Whitmer, played college basketball for. He's only 24.
Yeah, that's what's crazy.
So he's a young guy, but yeah, he was there for a while. And he is now playing for some team in the Lithuanian Basketball League and the Euro League.
Sounds about right.
So, but yeah, so that's who that was.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know who it is. But yeah, I think that does it for the mailbag. A couple other questions, but not really much else. Can't really say much about our group of 5. We're on conference championship weeks. I think the teams from each conference have proved why they are getting talked about. So not really much to touch up there.
And really the thing too is, the battle is for that 4th spot, I think, at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the highlight. But I got to know, what is your beef with the Beard Brothers Fantasy Football Podcast?
Beard Brothers, yes. There's an AJ over there, so I've been told.
There is an AJ over there.
There is, yes. And you brought it to my attention last week. I sent them a tweet. Never got a response.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. They're talking about Highlander games, and there can only be one AJ.
Mm-hmm.
And we both know who that is.
It's clearly my AJ.
We are both bearded men. The ladies are very fond of us both, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Why wouldn't they be?
You're bearded man and AJ.
Absolutely. So, yes, if these guys are listening, which I know they are, because why wouldn't they?
Right.
Let's talk. Let's figure this thing out, because there only can be one, and I agree. So we got to figure out how we're going to determine that.
Maybe we'll have to do a joint podcast episode where all 4 of us
down.
are on sometime.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no,
and also, too, for our listeners, we're going to have some fun here, kind of after bowl season, or probably in between bowl season and regular season, have some guests. I've talked to a few buddies of mine who are interested, and one of them will be nothing about college football.
Mm-hmm.
We've spoken about this. It's a good friend of mine, my college roommate, who was he's a professional wrestler. So he's also a groomsman in my wedding. But he is a college football fan. Actually, he's a UGA fan.
Yep.
He lives down in Tampa, and but he's in the independent wrestling circuit. So we're gonna totally go off subject sometime, talk to him, and just talk about professional wrestling.
Yeah, I'm definitely down. I think that'll be really good. And now he wrestled in college as well, right?
Yeah.
So we could even get a little bit of the, to keep in theme with the podcast, talk about that transition from college wrestling to the professional wrestling. So
Sure, absolutely.
But yeah, so I think, AJ, that does it for us.
Let's do it.
All right, guys, so thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to check out our Facebook page across the board for articles, podcasts, and more. Follow us on Twitter at atbsports.net. Follow our podcast link at atbsportspods. If you're looking for fantasy football advice, I know playoffs are coming up. Check out the Beard Brothers Fantasy Football Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Follow them on Twitter at BeardBrothersFF. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm Alex. Alongside me today is AJ, and we will see you guys next week.
See ya.